together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio. I had a snafu and was unable to connect till now. Much apologies for that. My name is Jerome. I am the Sane Environmentalist, and I hope we didn't lose everyone with, 22 minutes of dead air. I really seriously apologize for that. So today's show is going to be about I want to talk about Hanford. I want to talk about what's going on at Hanford right now with some of the illegal waste dumping that's going on. And I also wanted to talk about the Santa Susana Field Laboratory. So right now at Hanford, they are dumping, according to King 5 News, Washington, and thank you King 5 News, and all the credit goes to them. They are dumping waste at Hanford on the ground. What this waste is it's basically waste that's in soil tanks, and they've got these tanks, they're collecting contaminated soil in them, and they are filling with rainwater, and so to get the rainwater out, they're basically tipping these tanks on their end and dumping the water right straight onto the ground. And there's, if you go to king5.com, www.king5.com, you will see a video of them dumping this. You probably have to search for Hanford, illegal dumping, but yeah. So they are, according to all right, good. I kept hearing myself. So this is bad. What we need to do is we need to get on the phone with Hanford and the EPA and get them to not act stupid anymore about this stuff. According to King 5, the soils under Hanford are extremely contaminated over a broad area. The one thing you don't want to see is more waste sites. They tried to keep it a secret, said a Hanford worker with first-hand knowledge of the dumping event. The company did not notify the Washington State Department of Ecology in a timely fashion, which is a legal requirement as stated in the legally binding Washington State discharge permit. Dumping of the kind must be reported within 24 hours. Ecology received official notification of the events nearly a month after they occurred, and only after King 5 made email inquiries to the federal and state officials. So hats off to King 5 News in Washington. The news people tried to get a hold of the people and try to interview the director of the site of the cleanup, and he was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, and I think you got your information wrong. So that is that. Moving on again to Hanford, we have these tanks. There are 56 million gallons of high-level radioactive waste contained in 177 underground waste tanks, and more than a third of these have leaked, and nearly all of them are beyond their design lives. 28 of them are double-shelled, and 149 are single-shelled. They say at least 1 million gallons of high-level radioactive waste has leaked into the soil and groundwater under the tanks. 67 of the tanks have been known to leak in the past. One double-shelled tank has failed and is currently leaking waste into the space between the two shells of the tank. Liquid waste is a huge cleanup challenge, and the tanks are able to accommodate between 55,000 and 1 million gallons of waste, and are buried under about 7 or 8 feet of soil. The majority of the leaked waste is under the tanks in a vadose zone between the surface of the soil and the groundwater, and some of the waste has actually reached the groundwater, which means it will reach the river and eventually people's drinking water. In addition, the waste inside the tanks was also deliberately discharged to the soil. And an estimated 120 million gallons of waste from the tanks were directly ejected into the soil in this manner. And then what tanks hold waste created during the extraction of plutonium from spent fuel and contain both radioactive and chemical waste. It is also separated into sludge, liquid solids, and vapors. Basically, it's stratified in the tanks, and so you can't open a valve and drain the tanks because there's solid areas in between the liquid areas and sludge in between those areas. It's impossible. They'll basically have to probably bore holes through the waste to get to these pockets of liquid waste that are encapsulated inside of the sludge. So the only plan for dealing with it is they want to immobilize the waste in glass through a process called vitrification. And their waste treatment plant is being built for that purpose. However, this plant is riddled with design problems, delays, and an escalating cost. It is also not designed to have the capacity to treat all of the tank waste. So additional vitrification capacity will be required. Potential short-term fixes include building new tanks to provide space for the waste in the leaking tanks, building barriers over some of the tank farms to prevent water from further mobilizing the contamination until the waste can be pumped out of the tanks, and looking at other treatment technologies. There are no estimates available from the DOE about how much the waste treatment plant will cost, but taxpayers have already spent billions of dollars so far. Costs may exceed $20 billion for design and construction alone. Operational costs may be as high as $45 to $60 billion. The waste treatment plant needs to work safely and effectively to remove and stabilize the waste from Hanford's aging tanks. Efforts to build a vitrification plant started in the 1990s and have started repeatedly. The last effort, the fourth attempt, was initially scheduled to operate in 2019, but it is not expected to reach full capacity until 2036 or later. The organization Hanford Challenge has called for the dismissal of this contractor and the work on the waste treatment plants to stop while new tanks are built, and while an independent review of both evaluates and whether the plant can be salvaged and investigates alternatives. So we've got millions and millions of gallons of liquid and solid and sludge waste, and they're going to try to put it into glass form. And so we'll have probably big blocks of highly radioactive glass. What do you do with that? You know, I guess maybe if it's immobilized in glass, at least it can't leach out into the groundwater, but still. It seems to me that the cost of nuclear weapons gets bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes on. You know, one bomb probably ends up, when you think of the cost of creating it, mining it, processing it, refining it, making the actual bomb, it's probably a couple $2 billion a bomb to make this silly thing, you know, which could indeed be the end of humanity as we know it. So I encourage you to go to hanfordchallenge.org. Okay, they've got some really good articles and really good scientifically based information. They got photos of the sludge and the waste inside the tank leaking out, and they have a mailing list. So I suggest that you donate to them and help them out, especially if you live in Washington or Oregon. We have to get right on top of this bad situation. So now let's move on to Santa Susana Field Laboratory. I had not even heard of this, and I want to give a shout out to Libby Halevi, the nuclear hot seat person. She's wonderful and such a strong, great activist. And I want to give a shout out to her for bringing this to my attention. But apparently this Santa Susana Field Laboratory is where the Rocketdyne and NASA tested rocket engines. And also they did testing on nuclear reactors. It's a complex of industrial research and development facilities located on a 2,600-acre portion of the Southern California Simi Hills in the Simi Valley. It was used mainly for the development and testing of liquid propellant rocket engines for the United States space program and nuclear reactors from 1953 to 1980. And the U.S. government-sponsored Liquid Metals Research Center. Doesn't that sound scarily like the Terminator? Liquid metal? Who knows where they went with that, right? I'm sure that we'll find out sooner or later. The site is approximately 30 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles. Sage Ranch Park is adjacent to part of the southern boundary and the community of Bell Canyon along the entire southern boundary. Through the years, they had about 10 low-power nuclear reactors operating there, in addition to several critical facilities which helped develop science and applications for nuclear. At least 4 of the 10 reactors had accidents during their operation. The reactors located on the grounds of the plant were considered experimental, and therefore they had no containment structures. Basically, they just had a wide-open nuclear reactor in a warehouse. The site ceased research and development in 2006. And the years of rocket testing and nuclear reactor testing and liquid metal research have left the site significantly contaminated. Environmental cleanup is ongoing. The Atomics International Division of North American Aviation utilized the Area 4 there as a site of the first commercial nuclear power plant, testing and development of the SNAP-10A, the first nuclear reactor launched into outer space by the United States. Atomics International also operated the Energy Technology Engineering Center for the U.S. government. As overall interest in nuclear power gradually declined, Atomics International transitioned to non-nuclear energy-related products such as coal gasification, and they gradually ceased designing and testing nuclear reactors. The sodium burn pits, they have an area where they basically, the sodium burn pit, an open air pit for cleaning sodium contaminated components, was also contaminated when radioactively and chemically contaminated items were burned in it, in contravention of safety requirements. In an article in the Ventura County Star, James Palmer, a former worker there, was interviewed. The article notes that 27 men on his crew were there. 22 died of cancer. On some nights, Palmer returned home from work and kissed his wife hello, only to burn her lips with the chemicals that he had breathed at work. He also noted that during their breaks, their crew would fish in one of the 3 ponds, and the men would use a 90% hydrogen peroxide solution to neutralize the contamination. He says sometimes the water was so polluted it bubbled. The fish died off. Other spills and releases occurred over the decades of operation as well. A DOE investigation found widespread chemical and radioactive contamination on the property. And this was widely publicized in the local press. I can't believe I had not heard of this. The revelations led to substantial concern among community members and elected officials, resulting in the challenge to and a subsequent shutdown of continued nuclear activity at the site and the filing of lawsuits. Cleanup commenced with the EPA was brought in at the request of local legislatures to provide insight. On December 11, 2002, a top DOE official, Mike Lopez, described typical cleanup procedures executed by field lab employees in the past. Workers would dispose of barrels filled with highly toxic chemical and radioactive waste by shooting the barrels with rifles so that they would explode and release their contents into the air. It is unclear when this process ended, but it's certain that it did end prior to the 1990s. On July 26, 1994, two scientists, Otto Hyman and Harry Poo of Thousand Oaks, were killed when the chemicals they were illegally burning in the open pits exploded. After a grand jury investigation and a FBI raid on the facility, 3 Rocketdyne officials pled guilty in June to illegally storing explosive materials. Jury deadlocked on the more serious charges related to legal burning of hazardous waste. At trial, a retired Rocketdyne mechanic testified as to what he witnessed at the time of the explosion. I assumed we were burning waste, he testified, comparing the process used to one that was once used to legally dispose of leftover chemicals at the old burn pit. As Heine poured the chemicals for what would have been the third burn of the day, the blast occurred, Wells said. The background noise was so loud I didn't hear anything. I felt the blast and I looked down and my shirt was coming apart. When he realized what had occurred, he said, I felt to see if I was all there. I knew that I was burned, but I didn't know how bad. He suffered second and third degree burns to his face, arms, and stomach. During the years of operation, widespread use of highly toxic chemicals and additives to power over 30,000 rocket engine tests and to clean the rocket test stands afterwards, as well as considerable nuclear research at least 4 nuclear accidents. This has resulted in the Santa Susana Field Laboratory becoming a seriously contaminated site and an off-site pollution source requiring a sophisticated multi-agency and corporate cleanup project. It is an ongoing process. As of 2015, the site's owner is Boeing, with NASA and the DOE liable for several parcels within that. On August 2, 2005, Pratt & Whitney purchased Boeing's Rocketdyne official, but declined to acquire the Santa Susana Field Laboratory as part of this. In 2007, the staff at the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Board recommended a $471,000 fine against Boeing for 79 violations of the California Water Code during an 18-month period. From October 2004 to January 2006, wastewater and stormwater runoff coming from the lab had increased levels of chromium, dioxin, lead, mercury, plutonium, and other pollutants, the board said. The contaminated water flowed into the Bell Creek and into the Los Angeles River. And here's the scary part. In 2007, they announced that in a landmark agreement between Boeing and California officials, nearly 2,400 acres of land that is currently as soon as Sane Susanna Field Laboratory will become state park land. And the scary thing about that is that the parks are at a lower environmental, they have lower environmental qualifications. I mean, the levels are way lower. So there is just, it's horrible because they'll be able to have higher levels of contamination if it's a state park than if it's zoned for commercial or residential use. So people will be taking their kids to this property, which is horribly contaminated with plutonium, americium, strontium, all the nasties are there. And it is absolutely horrifying. They had one event where they had a nuclear reactor melt down, and the only thing that they could do to relieve the pressure in the reactor to keep it from turning into another Chernobyl was to basically open the vent stack and vent all of the pressure out of the reactor into the air. And they did that day after day, because, you know, a burning, out of control reactor doesn't just shut down right away. As well, they had the reactor, as I said before, with no containment at all. And and so what they would do is, since it was too hot to work around, radioactively hot, what they did was they opened this big garage door in the reactor building and just vented all the radioactivity that was coming out of the reactor right into the air. So they would send clouds and clouds of highly radioactive pollutants right over the greater Los Angeles area. And if you go to Google Earth and you look at and you can't find it. If you look up Sane Susanna Field Laboratory, you can't find it. What you got to do is you got to go to Google and Google it, and then find the GPS coordinates and plug those into Google Earth, and then you can find the site. But adjacent to the site, all around, are huge neighborhoods. And I did a video about this on YouTube, and no less than 3 of my subscribers were like, "Oh my God, maybe that's why I got cancer. Or maybe both my mom and my sister died of cancer." And there's huge, like a 600% increase in thyroid, breast, and leukemia and bone marrow cancer in the areas adjoining that site. They basically are responsible for the cancer and deaths of literally thousands of Americans. So what what can you do? You know, you got this horribly misguided nuclear weapons program, designed to quote unquote keep us safe. It doesn't keep us safe. The nuclear bomb has only created more danger in the world and more certainty of the ultimate destruction of humanity. How they could consider that this device will be able to make us safe through mutually assured destruction is beyond me. I don't think many Americans before the last 10 years realized just how nasty the process of creating these weapons is. We just thought, they just dig up the plutonium somehow and stick it in there, and no, they have to make the plutonium, they have to extract the plutonium, they have to process the plutonium. I did another video on my channel. It's an interview with a Rocky Flats worker. Her name is Judy Padilla, and she worked there, I think, for 15 or 20 years, or 22 years. And she started working in the plutonium trigger foundry. And they made what they called them top hats, because they were like pucks, kind of like a hockey puck. And And she said she worked and she poured the liquid plutonium into a mold from a glove box, and then broke them out of the molds. And she was like right up against the glove box with her arms through the gloves and her chest right against the glove box. She lost both of her breasts to breast cancer. So, there's been literally thousands of workers from that area that have died. They died as a result of working at Rocky Flats. And I'm sure a lot of the guy said 22 of his 27 co-workers died as a result of Rocky Flats. So it is just horrible. It is just horrible. So, what can we do as citizens? The education is only part of it. But what can we do? If you live anywhere around the Santa Susana Field Laboratory, I'm pulling up Google Earth right now to just see if I can list off some of the neighborhoods in the area. But it is all around the greater LA area. Just horrible. It's a horrible thing. Zooming in on LA. But pretty much all the way from, I would say, Long Beach, all the way down to the bottom of Orange County. You've got bad nuclear contamination. If you live in Anaheim, Long Beach, Los Angeles, can't believe I can't find Los Angeles on this map. So again, folks, I apologize for my internet was down. I was unable to get on. So it is, I guess that is what it is. It seems like there's been a lot of news lately. Alrighty, so basically, Calabas, Acuera Hills, Topanga, Santa Monica, Inglewood, anywhere in Los Angeles, Glendale, Van Nuys, Reseda, Canoga Park, Bell Canyon, Oak Park, Agoura Hills, Thousand Oaks, Newberry Park. You guys are all downwind of this site. Hidden Valley. You guys are all downwind of this site. And Long Beach as well. So it is... That whole area, I had no idea. I used to live in Santa Ana, which is part of Orange County, and I had no idea, but I probably breathed in some of the crap from this, In the Simi Valley, really bad. And if you try to go to this site today, you can't even find it on Google Earth. Moore Park, Simi Valley, those are the closest neighborhoods to it. Newberry Park. But yeah, Simi Valley is literally, one lady talked about her son. She lived in Simi Valley, and her son was he was an all-state track runner, and him and his classmates used to run from the school up to the edge of the Santa Susana Field Lab and back every day. and he got a very rare form of brain cancer, and he died from that. So that's just one story. If you look up Santa Susana cancer, let me do that real quick. It's nice having the this is Los Angeles Daily News. Women in residence believe cancer linked to Santa Susana Field Laboratory. Cancer has darkened Sue Brigman's door so many times she wonders if it's bad luck that runs through her family's veins. There was an infiltrating ductal carcinoma her mom fought in '98. The total prostatectomy of her dad. The 3-stage ovarian cancer that her sister survived with surgery and chemo. Her niece was diagnosed with melanoma. Recently, her daughter was diagnosed with and treated for retroperitoneal liposarcoma, a rare slow-growing cancer in the stomach. She grew up in Simi Valley with her parents and siblings near the Santa Susana Field Laboratory. She resided in Chatsworth and Canoga Park during her pregnancy and then moved back to Simi Valley for the birth and continued to reside there until 80. She's an oncology nurse, and she says for decades there's been talk about people have wondered how bad the contamination from this property is to the surrounding area. And they asked, when stories of cancer among residents in West Hills, Chatsworth, and Simi Valley rise, whether the water in the ground or the air they breathe made them sick. There have been some studies conducted on those who once worked at the site as well, as research on rates of thyroid cancer among residents who live up to 5 miles away. Boeing says there have been numerous studies, and they determined there are no cancer clusters near the site. But they have found up to 600% increase in thyroid cancer locally around there. 60%. From 88 to 95, research found that the incidence rate was more than 60% greater amongst residents living within 2 miles of the plant than residents living within 5 miles for thyroid, upper digestive tract, bladder, blood, and lymph tissue cancers. They found similar rates for thyroid cancers when they separately studied the period between 96 and 2002. Despite the findings, this lady said recently that those studies may not help Brigham or others who have wondered if their cancers are related to Santa Susana. A study released in November of this year found that women in East Ventura County communities of Thousand Oaks, Simi Valley, and western Los Angeles had invasive cancer rates of 10 to 20% higher than the rest of California. Really bad. So no attorney will take the case because there are a lot of badness going on with this. So the bottom line is this. We have been poisoned by the nuclear industry, by the efforts to keep us safe and keep us healthy. And we need to take action. We need to contact our local representatives, our congresspeople, the EPA, and raise hell and say, you guys need to, if you live in any of those neighborhoods that I mentioned, you need to call the EPA and say, you need to come and test the soil in my home test my basement for radon, test my water, and if it comes up that you are living in a contaminated zone, don't let them clean it up. Move the hell out of there. Find a place. I mean, if you own a home in California, it's worth bucks. Sell that thing. Move to Idaho or some place clean, Montana, Arizona. Get yourself a Geiger counter and just walk around your neighborhood and test it. If we don't take action, this is just going to continuously get worse and worse and worse. If we don't hold these people to account, they will never be accountable. So my name is Jerome, and I am the Sane Environmentalist. Again, I apologize for not being able to jump on until just now. The internet, both on my cell phone and the house internet, was both down, so I was unable to do anything about this or make even a phone call. So with that said, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you next Wednesday. I believe I'll have next Thursday I'm interviewing Donna Gilmore from San Onofre Safety. So look forward to that, and thank you very much. Waiting for the extra. Bye now.